In 1941, railway companies staked their future on a locomotive so potent it earned the moniker Big Boy. Tasked with transporting freight through terrains no other steam engine dared. Yet, within 2 decades, diesel engines rendered steam technology obsolete, relegating the world's largest locomotive to a museum, seemingly condemned to an impossible final journey. This should have marked its definitive end. However, when contemporary diesel engines faltered in Nebraska, the machine once dismissed as too sluggish amazingly rescued over 10 of them, demonstrating that the past retains its relevance. How did an ancient giant rise to safeguard the future of rail transport? Diesel locomotives revolutionized railroading almost instantaneously. For crews accustomed to a lifetime of steam operations, the divergence was immediate. Unlike the hours previously dedicated to building up pressure, a diesel engine could be ignited with a simple turn of a key. The laborious tasks of shoveling coal or meticulously balancing fire and water were no longer necessary. Where engineers and firemen once relied on extensive support staff, they now found themselves managing trains with just a few individuals in the cabin. Multiple diesel units could be interconnected and operated as a single entity, controlled by one crew in the lead locomotive. This innovation, known as multiple unit control, allowed railroads to adjust power levels as required without needing additional personnel. The era of double-heading steam engines, each requiring an independent crew, rapidly faded. With diesels, a single engineer could command the combined might of 4 or 5 locomotives simultaneously. The financial benefits extended far beyond the locomotive cab. Steam operations necessitated a vast support infrastructure, including coaling towers, water tanks, roundhouses, and legions of machinists to maintain every bearing, valve, and tube. Diesels traveled greater distances between refueling, demanded significantly less maintenance, and could be repaired with readily available off-the-shelf components. A railroad that once employed thousands just to keep its engines running could now transport more freight with a mere fraction of the workforce. Numerically, the figures were stark. Steam locomotives required 3 hours of maintenance for every hour of operation. Diesels drastically reduced this time, enabling railroads to cut expenses and streamline their processes. Water stops every 100 miles became a relic of the past. The extensive infrastructure that once sustained steam engines began to vanish, replaced by a more efficient, agile method of moving goods across the continent. In corporate boardrooms, the conclusion was unambiguous. Diesels were not merely a new type of locomotive. They represented a novel approach to railroading. For behemoths like the Big Boy, designed for a world powered by coal and steam, their obsolescence was inevitable. The last summer of steam on Union Pacific's main line transpired without fanfare, but its cessation was absolute. Just after midnight on July 21, 1959, a Big Boy completed its final revenue journey, pushing freight across the high plains one last time. There were no celebratory banners, no speeches, just a few railroaders witnessing a legend enter the yard and power down. Within 2 years, the entire fleet of 25 Big Boys was decommissioned. Their enormous frames, once the backbone of mountain freight, now stood silent in roundhouses and sidings from Wyoming to California. Some were dismantled, their steel repurposed for new machinery. Others were preserved, designated for display as reminders of a bygone era. Number 4014 completed its final miles on December 7, 1961. Having traversed over 1 million miles, it was officially retired from service. Union Pacific arranged for its donation to the Rail Giants Train Museum in Pomona, California. The westward journey was not a triumphant procession, but a slow, meticulous transit. A final traverse of deserts and urban areas, culminating at the tranquil edge of a fairground. There, 4014 was gently placed onto a short section of track, its firebox cold, its running gear still. A fresh coat of paint concealed the marks of decades on the rails, and a bronze plaque commemorated its retirement date and the gift to the museum. Visitors could climb into the cab, grasp the throttle, and imagine the sensation of guiding 16 driving wheels along the main line. Yet the engine itself remained frozen in time. As years passed, the world evolved around it. Diesel engines hauled longer trains with fewer personnel. The towers and workshops that once served steam engines disappeared. Children grew up knowing Big Boy only as a story or a static exhibit. The notion of restoring such a machine to active life seemed as remote as the age of steam itself. For half a century, 4014 waited, an artifact rather than a locomotive. The epic of giants had ended, and the world had progressed. Union Pacific's December 2012 announcement reverberated like a thunderclap throughout the railway preservation community. After decades of quiescence, the company declared its intention to revive a big boy. The news spread rapidly, but for those most intimately involved with number 4014, it entailed extensive paperwork, numerous meetings, and months of meticulous negotiation. The Rail Giants Train Museum in Pomona had been the custodian of the locomotive since 1962. Volunteers had diligently kept its running gear free of rust and its cab free from vandalism. Some had dedicated entire weekends to oiling bearings and checking for leaks, even when visitor numbers were low. They viewed themselves as custodians, not just caretakers, and the prospect of relinquishing it was not taken lightly. Union Pacific's team arrived in the summer of 2013, armed with original blueprints and a strategy to return number 4014 to mainline operation. Museum board members scrutinized every detail, weighing the promise of restoration against the loss of their star exhibit. The decision was reached on July 23, 2013. The museum would transfer custody, entrusting Union Pacific to safeguard the locomotive's legacy for future generations. Official documents were signed, and ownership of the locomotive reverted to the railroad that had originally constructed it. The agreement included a pledge that number 4014 would not be scrapped or allowed to deteriorate, but would be restored to working condition and made accessible to the public. With the legal obstacles surmounted, Union Pacific's crew commenced preparations for number 4014's cross-country relocation. Volunteers observed as mechanics inspected the running gear, checked the journal boxes, and meticulously planned the logistics of moving a 1.2 million pound artifact from a fairground onto the national rail network. Decades of diligent stewardship had paid off. The locomotive remained in remarkable condition. As the final signatures dried, number 4014 was poised to depart Pomona, not as an exhibit, but as a candidate for revitalization. At sunrise on January 26, 2014, Union Pacific's logistics team assembled at the perimeter of the Los Angeles County Fairgrounds. The upcoming task was unlike any routine transport. Big Boy 4014, weighing nearly 1.2 million pounds and extending 132 feet from coupler to coupler, would need to be meticulously moved from museum tracks onto the main line. 4 diesel locomotives idled nearby, primed to haul this colossal artifact over 1,300 miles of active railway. Moving a locomotive of this magnitude demanded extreme precision and composure. Every curve and crossing along the route had to be thoroughly checked for clearance. The engine's 16 driving wheels and massive articulated frame meant it could not be hurried. Each mile necessitated strict speed limitations, with the diesels maintaining a steady, slow pace for their immense load. Special permits facilitated its passage through urban sprawl, deserts, and mountain passes, while crews coordinated with dispatchers in 3 states to prevent bottlenecks and delays at every junction. The sheer length and weight of 4014 compelled rail planners to recalculate siding lengths and bridge load limits, sometimes halting traffic for hours to allow the giant to pass. The convoy slowly advanced eastward, attracting throngs of onlookers at every stop. At some crossings, school children lined the fences, waving as the big boy rolled past for the first time in half a century. Mechanics rode along, checking for hot bearings and monitoring the locomotive's running gear, vigilant for any sign of malfunction. On open stretches, the diesels settled into a consistent rhythm, their combined horsepower just sufficient to keep the enormous engine moving at a careful speed. The journey from Pomona to Cheyenne was not about velocity. It was about arriving intact. After nearly a week on the tracks, 4014 entered Wyoming. The final approach to Cheyenne was slow and deliberate, with crews guiding the locomotive through the steam shop gates. As the doors closed behind it, the big boy was finally home. No longer a static display, but a contender for rebirth. The subsequent chapter would demand skills and knowledge long since forgotten. But for now, the journey was complete. Inside the Cheyenne steam shop, the work commenced with a persistent problem that had plagued Union Pacific for generations: how to enable a firebox designed for coal to burn oil cleanly and reliably. Back in 1946, engineers attempted to convert Big Boy 4005 to oil, but the flame propagated along the firebox floor, resulting in cold spots and inconsistent heating. That experiment concluded after 2 years. This time, the team designed a new fire pan, constructed from 3/8-inch plate steel and reinforced to withstand the locomotive's weight and the heat of combustion. At its core, a single Venturi casting burner replaced the original coal grates. Oil flowed by gravity from the tender, was atomized with steam, and entered the firebox through a meticulously calculated nozzle. Air tubes lined the sides, supplying oxygen precisely where needed. The flash wall, a massive slab of refractory brick, absorbed the initial heat blast and diffused it throughout the colossal space. The outcome was a fire that burned uniformly from end to end, producing almost no smoke, only a clear, hot exhaust indicating efficient combustion. Modernization did not cease with the firebox. Federal regulations mandated positive train control on all mainline locomotives, even those built before World War II. Engineers worked from the original blueprints, then integrated microprocessors and radio antennas into the cab. The monitoring system kept tabs on speed, location, and signal status, with the capability to automatically halt the train if safety regulations were violated. Each component required either a complete overhaul or an adaptation. This included brake lines, electrical harnesses, and even the antiquated air compressors. When a specific part was unavailable for purchase, skilled machinists meticulously crafted it from scratch, ensuring exact measurements down to 1/1000th of an inch. For the first time, a big boy locomotive met the stringent safety standards of the 21st century, making it fit to traverse the same tracks as contemporary diesel engines. The previous limitations of fuel, fire, and regulatory restrictions had finally been conquered. On May 4th, 2019, steam permeated the Cheyenne air. After 5 years of dedicated effort, the workshop crew assembled by the tracks, their gaze fixed upon a locomotive that had not propelled itself in nearly 6 decades. Big Boy 4014 stood resplendent, its boiler heated, every system thoroughly checked and rechecked. The fireman gingerly opened the oil valve, observing the ascent of pressure. Inside the cab, the engineer grasped the throttle, experiencing the weight of history in his hands. Custom fabricated parts, meticulously crafted from the original schematics, replaced components that had succumbed to the ravages of time and corrosion. Rod brasses, valve gear, and air compressors, each piece precisely measured and cut to the exacting specifications of the 1940s, were now brought to life by artisans who had remastered their craft. All 16 driving wheels awaited the signal. The refurbished firebox, now fueled by oil instead of coal, emanated a consistent, steady warmth. Modern interfaces for positive train control were situated alongside gauges and levers that had remained unchanged since World War II. With a final nod from the crew, the engineer gently advanced the throttle. The exhaust barked, and the colossal engine began to stir. 7,000 horsepower surged through its frame. The workshop doors swung wide as 4014 glided out into the Wyoming sun, steam billowing from its stack. For a fleeting moment, silence reigned. Then, a crescendo of cheers erupted. Mechanics, welders, machinists, and apprentices all beamed, some discreetly wiping away tears. The impossible had been achieved. Big Boy 4014 was revitalized, prepared to operate where only diesel locomotives had dominated for generations. 10,000 feet of freight cars spanned the Nebraska landscape, every coupler secured, every wheel motionless. The incline at Blair Hill measured just over 1%. While a challenge, it was nothing that diesel engines hadn't overcome hundreds of times before. That afternoon, circumstances shifted. One of the lead locomotives experienced a power failure. Its control screen flickered, and relays clicked fruitlessly as the engineer struggled to revive it. The remaining units strained, their traction motors whining, but the ponderous train refused to budge. Air hoses hissed, radios crackled, and the dispatcher's voice cut through the static, a blend of calm and urgency. The main line was obstructed. Eastbound traffic began to accumulate behind the stalled freight. Crew members meticulously reviewed checklists, cycling breakers, checking fuel, and silently hoping for a miracle. The dispatcher weighed his limited options, his voice taut as he relayed the situation up the chain of command. 10,000 feet of steel, fully loaded and ready for transport, was immobilized by a singular mechanical malfunction. In the background, someone recalled a crucial detail from the operations board. Big Boy 4014 was nearby, making its return journey unladen from a public exhibition in Omaha. The dispatcher reached for the telephone, authorization codes at the ready. The call was brief and to the point. Within minutes, the order was confirmed. Bring the steam engine to the scene. As the news disseminated along the line, engineers and conductors nervously watched the clock. Every minute the main line remained blocked signified lost schedules, delayed shipments, and increasing pressure from headquarters. A question hung in the air. Could a 78-year-old steam locomotive accomplish what the contemporary fleet could not? The answer would manifest on the tracks, reverberating through every radio channel from Blair Hill to the division office. Steam streamed from the relief valves as Big Boy 4014 coupled onto the rear of the immobilized freight. The crew worked with dispatch, inspecting hoses and tightening couplers, their every action observed by railroaders up and down the line. The dispatcher's voice resonated through the cab, granting the go-ahead. Firemen opened the oil valve wider, sensing the heightened heat surge in the firebox. Pressure climbed beyond 200 pounds per square inch. The engineer's hand gripped the throttle, his eyes fixed on the ammeter, awaiting the signal. Otto, a rail fan, captured the moment on video from the embankment as the Big Boy commenced its push. The colossal drivers briefly slipped, steel grinding against steel. Then they secured a grip. The exhaust boomed, a deep, resonant bark that reverberated across the fields. 7,000 horsepower surged into the stalled train. Inch by inch, the couplers became taut. For a brief instant, nothing moved. Then, with a sudden jolt, the string of freight cars began to ascend the hill. The push endured for 20 minutes. Otto's recording captured every second. The soaring white plume, the tremor of the earth, the determined and resolute expressions of the crew. Dispatchers monitored the gradual climb, meticulously calculating tonnage, horsepower, and grade. 10,000 feet of train, nearly 2 miles in length, crested Blair Hill. propelled by a 78-year-old machine once deemed obsolete. Within hours, Otto's video went viral. Rail fans and railroaders nationwide witnessed a steam locomotive achieve what a convoy of modern diesels could not. Licensing requests flooded in from news organizations, eager to broadcast the moment when Big Boy 4014 demonstrated its enduring capability to accomplish the extraordinary. For the crew, it was more than a rescue. It was a vindication. Steel and steam answering a call no one believed would ever arise again. Steam power once symbolized a bygone era. Now, one locomotive challenges that notion. Big Boy 4014 serves as tangible proof that superior engineering can transcend fleeting trends, addressing shortcomings that even modern technology cannot always overcome. As the frontiers of progress continue to evolve, reflecting on what endures and why might illuminate the path to future innovations. Sometimes, the future still benefits from the wisdom of the past. How does this insight inform the design of modern machinery?